Tonko, I understand, will be on their way pretty soon. This is the third hearing in a series of hearings that we're having about the Make It in America agenda. These are called Make It in America, What's Next? And I want to thank the members who are here, and I expect the dais to be filled in a not too distant time. Over the summer, as members were home in their districts, many convened field hearings with experts and local leaders to ask them the same question we've been asking here. How can House Democrats best adapt and expand upon the Make It in America plan to help create jobs and opportunities here in our country? The creation of jobs and the ability to get a job is the most important issue in almost every American's mind. On July 31st, I hosted a field hearing in Maryland's 5th District, where I heard from local innovators, manufacturers, and educators about new ideas and new initiatives being undertaken across the district and our region that could be scaled up to help advance the goals of Make It in America across the country. I know other members participating today will bring similar feedback from their own communities. Today, we're going to be hearing testimony both from members who weren't able to join us at our last member day on July 9th and from others who wish to share some of the feedback they received from field hearings in their districts, as well as to give us ideas of what we ought to be doing to respond to the question, Make It in America, What's Next? Before we begin, though, I want to provide a brief overview of why House Democrats are so focused on advancing a plan for jobs and opportunities. Over the past 7 years, we've watched our economy go from crisis to recovery, aided by a relentless focus on private sector growth and a stronger middle class from the Obama administration. In October 2009, just a few months after the president took office, the national unemployment rate peaked at 10%. The rate of uninsured was at 18%. In 2015, we have 12 million more private sector jobs than we did in 2009. After the longest period of uninterrupted job growth in our history. I want to repeat that. During the course of the latter part of the Obama administration, spanning both of its terms, we've had the longest period of uninterrupted job growth in our history. The unemployment rate has now fallen to 5.1%. The number of Americans who have health insurance since 2013 recently reached 17.6 million new people, bringing the uninsured rate down to below 10%, its lowest level since records were first kept a half a century ago. These are all very good indicators, of course, but millions of Americans are still worried about finding a job, making ends meet, securing a better future for their children. In short, making it in America. We need to take our economy from recovery to resurgence. From recovery, which we have accomplished, but we're not to resurgence yet. And people are feeling that we're not where we need to be. That's what Make It in America is all about. And with our economic circumstances having changed since 2010, when the plan was first launched, we're working to adapt it to meet the new challenges and new opportunities in the years ahead. So today, we're not only going to be talking about manufacturing, education, infrastructure, and innovation, though these remain important components of Make It in America. We're also going to be hearing about the federal government's ability to encourage the growth of jobs and opportunities in emerging economic sectors, as well as how to make government work more effectively and make sure that it is more responsive to workers, entrepreneurs, and consumers. Workers and job creators are in this together, and the better each one of them does, they both will succeed together. So without further ado, let me introduce the first of today's panels. But before I introduce the panelists, a quick note about procedure. As we did last time, I'll give each member 3 minutes, too short a time, but your statements will be submitted. We do have a record, as you can see. We're taking a transcript to offer their prepared statements. And once everyone at the table is concluded, I'm going to go through all the witnesses at one time before we get into questions. There will be a time for a member at members of the dais to ask questions. And now I'm pleased to introduce the first panel, which focuses on rebuilding America's promise. Joining us are Representative Luis Gutierrez from Illinois, Ranking Member Bobby Scott from Virginia of the Education and Workforce Committee, on which he's the ranking member, Paul Tonko, who will be here shortly, he's in a hearing now, Dan Kildee from Michigan, and Brendan Boyle from Pennsylvania. I'll now be glad to yield to Representative Gutierrez for his comments, and thank him for being here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hoyer, for inviting me and allowing me to be with such a great group of my colleagues here this afternoon. Whenever I give a floor speech about immigration, or if I go on Fox News, I always get a few predictable reactions. First, I'm told to go back to Mexico, even though I was born in Chicago, to a Puerto Rican family. And second, I'm asked why I spend so much time working on immigration when I should be helping Americans. I understand the first one. Most people don't do a very good job of distinguishing between Mexicans, Guatemalans, Peruvians, Puerto Ricans, or any other group. And frankly, when I hear Donald Trump say most Mexicans are rapists and drug dealers, I know he's insulting my family too. The second one is a little more complicated, and it's why I'm here today, because I think many people see both the politics and the economics of immigration as a zero-sum game. In many people's minds, what you do for immigrants is necessarily something you are not doing for the people who are born here. But immigration is not a zero-sum game. Policies that promote legal immigration and legal status for immigrants actually make things better for everyone. As one advocate in Tennessee said, immigrants are not here to take a slice of the pie away from us. They're here to build a bigger pie. One of the best examples of this is in my hometown of Chicago. Everyone knows about the Magnificent Mile. That's Michigan Avenue, the main street of the Midwest economy. What most people don't know is that the second biggest jobs and tax revenue generating corridor of Chicago is 26th Street, in the heart of La Villita, or Little Village, the center of the Mexican-American immigrant community in Chicago and the economic engine of my district. If you take a drive down 26th Street on a Saturday, there will be stop-and-go traffic because it's a bustling business district with limited parking, and you will see crowds of families shopping and running errands. They buy, the business owners sell, and the city's tax receipts grow and grow. Today's immigrants are simply a part of the pattern that has been repeating itself for a long time as we've been a nation. Immigrants, often with few resources, build up congregations and parishes and neighborhoods and business districts and then businesses and corporations. Eventually, they're so integrated into our society, we cannot imagine our cities without their contribution. Whether it was the Irish, the Italians, Polish, Chicago has given people opportunity, and they paid it back by making Chicago bigger and greater and stronger. African Americans who fled slavery and Jim Crow in the South, or my parents who fled poverty in rural Puerto Rico. A lot like immigrants today, we are usually treated with a great degree of skepticism and sometimes outright hostility at first, but eventually each group takes their place contributing to the community and economy and making the pie bigger. Let me just end with this. You know, you take immigrants, they fill in the gaps in our economy and don't necessarily tend to compete with native workers for the capable American workers who could pick fruits and vegetables and could do the dirty back-breaking work in the fields of America. But there aren't many Americans who aspire to do that work. The reality is 90% of the workers in some sectors of agriculture are immigrants, and most of them are undocumented because we don't have a functioning legal immigration system. So despite all the rhetoric and simplistic answers we get from politicians trying to scare you into voting for them, the reality is that immigrants aren't taking a piece of our pie. They're making it better. Instead, on average, immigrants are contributing and making a bigger pie. And as it turns out, they're also picking, washing, packaging the apples, the cherries, the blueberries we have in our pies. Thank you very much for letting me testify today. I look forward to the questions.
Thank you very much, and I want to congratulate Mr. Gutierrez. Nobody in our country, I think, has fought harder for, been more effective advocate of a policy for comprehensive immigration reform, which the CBO says will advantage our economy. Congressman has just testified to that, but CBO says it would be good for our economy, would grow our economy, and would be of economic benefit to our country. So thank you very much, Mr. Gutierrez, for your leadership and for your statement today. Ranking Member Scott, appreciate your being here, one of our senior members.
Thank you, Mr. Hoyer, and thank you for inviting me here today for this important discussion. We need to have more of these discussions about what needs to change so that American people can share in the prosperity they work so hard to create. But unfortunately, our colleagues across the aisle are focused on other things, making it harder for workers to form a union, attempting over 60 times to roll back the Affordable Care Act, all at the same time giving tax breaks to the wealthy. Meanwhile, they've wasted millions of dollars being fixated on the Benghazi Committee. Mr. Hoyer, you know that families across America are struggling to make ends meet. Angela in Cleveland took 3 days took 3 days off with the stomach flu, and that's a good thing because she's a teacher. But 3 sick days is all she had, so the next time she got the flu, she went to work sick because her job depended on it. And she watched the illness infect many of her students in the classroom. I've received many stories from working men and women across the country, like Angela, who are giving all they can to their work, but they can't get a shred of dignity in return. India Ford, who's in my district, spoke to members yesterday about how she worked nights and weekends for nearly a dozen years at a restaurant. As a single mom, this meant not being there for homework, PTA meetings, and even to put her daughter to bed. Finally, she took a new job with a manager who offered to give her a schedule that worked for her family. And what did she ask for? The lunch shift. Then, thanks to this simple change, she now is home with her daughter at night and she's able to attend school events. But basic protections like fair schedules and paid sick days shouldn't depend on winning the boss lottery. They should be a fundamental right of every citizen. And that's why yesterday, many of my Democratic colleagues and I launched the Working Families Agenda. The Working Families Agenda calls on Congress to deliberate on the responsible solutions that hardworking Americans want and need. In my written testimony, I've included a few fact sheets setting out the Working Families Agenda, which includes legislation that would boost wages, help workers better balance work and family, and level the playing field so that all workers have a chance to succeed. Thank you, Mr. Hoyer, for joining us yesterday for the Working Families Day of Action, where we heard the facts and evidence in support of these policies. And I think it's time that we started putting people and their families first in America, and that's what the Working Families Agenda does. So again, thank you, Mr. Hoyer, for bringing us together. And I'll submit for the record the details of the Working Families Agenda.
I want to thank the ranking member of the Education and Workforce Committee. The hearing yesterday, the panel was excellent. The room was packed. It was standing room only, and it was obvious that the subject that you were pursuing was of great interest to much of the public. And I know that you were covered pretty extensively. You said this morning at the ranking members meeting I forget the number of tweets and Facebook and YouTube references there were, but there were a very large number and a very educational seminar. So thank you very much for your leadership on this. Now I'm going to yield to Mr. Dan Kildee of Michigan, who is relatively new to the Congress, but not new to this issue. Congressman Kildee.
Thank you, Mr. Hoyer, for this and for your leadership on making it in America. America faces, as we all know, a lot of urgent needs, urgent challenges. And the concern that I have is that in order for us to be competitive as a nation, as we try to grow our economy, we have to invest. And we have to invest in our cities, particularly our older cities, and especially in the aging infrastructure in those places if we expect them to be able to compete. What's frustrating, I know, to a lot of us is that we know that it's entirely within our power. It's within our capacity to make those sorts of investments, but Congress simply needs to act. The failure to act on our nation's aging infrastructure can be seen in my hometown. It's a stark example of what happens when we allow essential infrastructure to age. In my hometown, the government can't guarantee to its residents safe, drinkable water. In the richest country on earth, we can't guarantee safe drinking water to the residents of the city of Flint. Due in part to the fact that we have this aging system, exacerbated by a terrible decision made by Michigan's governor, his appointee as receiver, to use an alternate water source to the Great Lakes, highly corrosive water from the Flint River, which has resulted in elevated lead levels in the water. And as a group of courageous local physicians just were able to reveal, elevated blood lead levels in children in Flint, Michigan. This is a crime, and it was a completely avoidable situation. It's almost hard to imagine in the 21st century, in a city of like my hometown, the birthplace of General Motors, a place that helped build our incredible industrial capacity, now can't deliver clean drinking water to its residents, causing potentially hundreds of billions of dollars of damage to that system. It's a failure of government. It's a failure of government certainly at the state level for taking a short-term balance sheet approach, as we see so many decisions now, particularly made by the majority in this Congress, a short-term balance sheet approach to a question that really has to do with our long-term sustainability and our viability as a competitive country. Federal government bears some responsibility for this as well, as essentially they didn't raise the red flags that they ought to have. But the reality of these older cities is one that really is dependent on a federal government that sees the value that these places have in our competitiveness and sees the moral imperative that would allow every citizen to have a chance to be the most productive member of society that they can be. Federal policy has not aligned with the needs of these older places. We need trade policy that makes sure we protect American workers, largely in these communities. We need investment in these older cities. We need infrastructure. We need education, not because of some act of largesse on the part of the federal government, but because it is in our financial interest to make sure that every American and every community where those Americans live can make the greatest contribution to the incredible productive capacity that we have. We have failed as a country to reinvest in these older places, and it's incumbent upon Congress to take steps to correct that. And that's why I'm so happy, Mr. Hoyer, that you've been able to assemble this group so that we can bring daylight to these really important questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your testimony, Mr. Kildee, Congressman Kildee. You call attention to a aging infrastructure. The gentleman next to you represents Philadelphia, of course, and Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, right? But the fact that we have not gotten to a policy of investing in the rehabilitation and, frankly, installation of infrastructure. We think of roads and bridges, but you're talking about sewer systems, water systems that are absolutely essential for the health and welfare of our communities, whether they be rural communities or whether they be urban communities, is one of the real challenges confronting us. And ironically, investing in infrastructure will create very good jobs as well. So not only will we get infrastructure that will make our communities better, it will help our economy and help people find some good paying jobs. So thank you very much for your testimony and your leadership. Next, Brendan Boyle, as I said, from Pennsylvania, representing the city of Philadelphia and Montgomery County, Pennsylvania. We're very pleased that you're here. He's a new member of Congress, but served in the state legislature, so certainly not new to the legislative milieu. Congressman Boyle.
Thank you, and thank you, Whip Hoyer, and to all of my colleagues who are part of this. The goal of Whip Hoyer's Make It in America initiative is not only to restore our nation's manufacturing capacity, but also to reaffirm the basic bargain upon which we built the most powerful and productive middle class the world has ever seen. I'm a product of that bargain. I would not be sitting here today if not for the opportunities afforded to my parents in an economy that was more level and more humane than it is today. In order to help as many struggling workers to personally make it in America, with as much upward mobility, economic security, and prosperity as enjoyed by past generations, we must restore our beleaguered middle class by giving it a more substantial stake of our economy. Consider, even though our labor force now, average hourly wage for employees has only risen 9%. This figure represents a fundamentally undervalued workforce that needs fair pay, fair opportunity, and fair rules. As we look to restore the basic bargain, we must remember that unions play a critical role in reaffirming the value of labor. Throughout the middle of the 20th century, when organized labor was at its height, increased productivity was rewarded with increased wages. Unions were a crucial bulwark against inequality. The share of America's income taken by the top 10% was held down at 30% when union membership was at its zenith. And that income share has now reached historic highs, 50%, just as union membership has fallen to historic lows, now 11%. I don't think those statistics are a coincidence. Organized labor has demonstrated its power to bolster the dignity of workers beyond its own member rolls, helping to maintain fair wages and benefits across entire industries, while upholding heightened value and productivity levels that serve the best interests of employers and the economy at large. Labor's commitment to producing well-qualified and highly experienced workers through apprenticeships and exhaustive forms of training has produced entire generations of highly skilled tradespeople and laborers that have exceedingly high standards for the work they do. And firms are willing to pay much more for their good work. I hear that time and again from companies that are located in Philadelphia. Median earnings of union members are $200 more per week than they were for non-union workers. This model produced our shared prosperity throughout the course of the 20th century. If we are to defend the prospects of our middle class while meeting a historically high demand for skilled workers, we must give more Americans the resources they need to demand better pay and better jobs. In a recent survey of manufacturing firms, 7 out of 10 executives reported that they cannot hire enough workers with sufficient technical training. It is estimated that such a skills gap will leave 2 million job openings without qualified candidates in the next 10 years. To bridge such a massive gap, it will take a coordinated effort among the public and private sectors to upskill more Americans and fully develop their professional potential. It would be well worth it for workers who stand to earn much more with greater skills to market for their employers, whose reputations rely on productivity and high-quality products, and for our economy at large, which will be unbeatable if it employs the massive potential of the American workforce. The basic bargain of fair pay for fair work, modest as it may be, is our greatest and most potent asset. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. And it's clear that if we're going to make it in America, we need to have a pay structure and a work environment that allows for safe work and work that pays at a level that one can support themselves and their families and not be in poverty. And it's not just raising the minimum wage, but it is, as the gentleman points out, raising the share of increased productivity, which unions, of course, have been so helpful in getting members to. I note that we now have Mr. Paul Tonko, Congressman Tonko of upstate New York, who is one of the biggest proponents of Make It in America in the Congress, and I thank him for being here. Look forward to his testimony.
Thank you very much, Whip Hoyer. Good afternoon, and thank you to you, Representative Hoyer, and our colleagues. As our minority whip, you have brought great attention to the issues of Make It in America. I want to thank you for holding this hearing to consider Make It in America policies, a cornerstone of our caucus agenda. There were many critical issues discussed at the last hearing, but I would like to speak to an issue that is more foundational, because without investing in infrastructure, none of these priorities will be possible. A modern economy needs modern infrastructure. There is growing awareness of crumbling roads and bridges in need of repair, but underground water clean and reliable water for residents and businesses, manufacturers, should be a given. But sadly, our water infrastructure is in terrible shape. In 2013, the American Society of Civil Engineers gave America's water infrastructure a grade of D. Without adequate water systems, small businesses, major manufacturers, electric utilities, and farms cannot function, let alone grow. The effects are very real as communities' ability to create and sustain jobs is at risk. And and there is a direct impact on manufacturing. According to the Value of Water Coalition, 46% of water consumed in America is used by manufacturers. In 2013, EPA's fifth national assessment of public water system infrastructure showed a total 20-year investment need of $384.2 billion. That is a real increase of about $157 billion since the first assessment was released in 1995. We're going in the wrong direction. It is extremely difficult for financially distressed cities, let alone small communities, to find the funds to repair and upgrade their water systems. Older cities have been hollowed out, and their unreliable century-old water systems make it nearly impossible to attract new businesses and new investments. Legacy cities are falling behind in competitiveness, and without proper investment in these very basic needs, they will not be able to catch up. Earlier this year, I toured multiple municipalities' water systems in my district. While unseen, these systems are immense. The city of Albany has approximately 317 miles, or the distance from Albany to Baltimore, in pipes underground. This infrastructure is 135 years old, dating back to when Rutherford B. Hayes was in the White House. On my tours, I heard countless stories of pipes bursting, power outages, and public service interruptions, all to a decades-long habit of disinvestment and complacency when it comes to maintaining, developing, and improving the way we utilize one of our most important commodities. My district is not unique. EPA estimates that there are 240,000 water main breaks per year. 240,000 water main breaks per year. On top of that, leaking pipes lose an estimated 7 billion gallons of clean drinking water each day. We're throwing clean water and the money used to treat it down the drain. I'm working on legislation to fund drinking water infrastructure. This includes the Drinking Water State Revolving Loan Fund, the primary source of federal funding to finance these projects. This bill will also provide additional funding for technical assistance, that which would be applied to small water systems, and include provisions to direct more funds to systems that serve disadvantaged communities. Only through robust federal investment and partnerships with states can we reduce the growing funding gap and help water utilities do what is expected in a modern society, and that is deliver clean, safe drinking water to our homes and our businesses. Water is an engine for our economy. Without safe drinking water and sound water management, it does not matter how much we invest in workforce training, STEM education, or advanced manufacturing. Businesses will not invest in areas without reliable public infrastructure. Thank you again for having me here today. Moving forward, I hope we can continue to stress the importance of water infrastructure to our Make It in America agenda. I welcome any members' input to improve the partnerships needed to tackle this funding gap and bring our water infrastructure into the 21st century. And with that,
Kildee was, interesting enough, speaking of the same thing with respect to water, water supply, water quality, water safety, and it is emblematic, I think, of how we need to think about what goes into creating an environment in which manufacturing can thrive. It's not just bricks and mortar. It is all that on which manufacturing and enterprises rely to function effectively. So thank you very much for your leadership and your testimony. Congressman Norquist, I understand, has a question of Mr. Boyle.
Thank you. Congressman Boyle, you live directly across the river from my district, and you talked about the relationship between the trades or the unions and productivity. That relationship has been fostered because of the activities of the unions recruiting those, particularly with minorities and women. Can you talk more about how they've been able to recruit and how that has increased the productivity within their ranks?
Yeah, actually, the area that we both share in the greater Philadelphia and South Jersey area, we have a very vigorous workforce that has a high percentage of skilled tradespeople precisely because of organized labor and the building trades specifically. What is so impressive about their recruiting operation is they are essentially forms of higher education. Their apprenticeship programs, 4 or 5 years, I've toured a number of them that are in my district, at the sprinkler fitters, at the iron workers, at the steam fitters, at the plumbers. These are tough programs. You have to absolutely be committed just and to make it through this sort of a program. So organized labor makes this great investment in both recruiting people and people from all walks of life, and then educating them so that way they have the tools they need to be part of a productive and high-skilled workforce. They then turn around and are hired, yes, at higher wages and higher benefits, but appropriately so. No business person is in business to lose money. The businesses that work with organized labor and hire firms that are unionized actually get greater value out of those workers, so much so that they would rather turn to them than an unskilled labor force. So too often, and this is an important point I want to make, too often our national media might have this perception that it's labor against management or that it's labor against the company. Missing out of that false dichotomy are all the companies that work well with organized labor and that partner together to win projects, to win jobs, and to boost our economy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Norcross. Thank you, Mr. Boyle. Mr. Gutierrez, one of the things that obviously we've been advantaged by over the centuries is the extraordinarily talented immigrants who have come to our country, established enterprises, grown jobs, did inventions, innovations, and development. 40% of America's Nobel Prize winners were born overseas. Could you perhaps give a couple of examples of, in your community, people who have come here, established businesses, created jobs, and made a difference in the economy?
Thank you, Mr. Hoyer. They do so every day. One of the interesting things is that you are more likely to be self-employed if you're an immigrant. You're not a naturalized citizen. You're an immigrant to the United States. You're more likely. And of course, those that are self-employed are more likely to do what? Create other jobs. As we know, small businesses are the engine of our economy. So versus going and working for a company, immigrants are much more likely than those of us born in the United States to actually create their own business and create them. I go back, Mr. Hoyer, everybody thinks of Chicago and they say, oh, we got to go to Michigan Avenue and spend a few bucks there, right? And the tax tax dollars roll into the coffers, the sale tax dollars roll into the coffers of the city of Chicago. That's true. But the second largest revenue to the city of Chicago in terms of tax receipts is 26th Street in my congressional district after Michigan Avenue. There isn't an empty store. You can always kind of tell, Mr. Hoyer, when you and I can't afford to open up a congressional office on that street, it's because the demand for the space is such that, you know, it's not prudent for us to open up an office there, although there are a lot of people there. So it says that, and I just want to lastly say, because a lot of us think, I just want you to think of Google, right? That's an immigrant. Mr. Brin came to the United States of America. But I think what he does...
Father is a professor at the University of Maryland. Thank you very much. We've just been great for the University of Maryland.
But what you see, Mr. Hoyer, there is that I believe that he and others like him that come and create jobs and technology in the United States of America also help the competition for those of us that were born here. I think Steve Jobs was better at what he did because he had somebody competing with him. I just think that we all compete, and why not bring all that talent here to the United States of America? Because in the future, I think it's going to be technology that's going to keep us at the cutting edge, and I want people to keep creating that technology here.
No doubt about it. Thank you very, very much. We're going to go to the next panel because one of our panelists has to leave. But I want to thank all of the panelists for being here. Mr. Scott was here as well, Mr. Tonko, before you got here. But your testimony, as I said, in full will be in the record. And, of course, we look forward to working with all of you so that every American can make it in our great country.
Mr.
Congressman
Whip,
Tonko.
if I might, I was somewhat delayed in getting here because we were at the Subcommittee of Environment and the Economy on Energy and Commerce talking about this very issue. And we, as a Democratic caucus, pushed very hard to get them to expand legislation that will look at a broader investment than we're doing for water infrastructure, especially in light of 46% of the water consumed in this country is by manufacturers. So, again, we appreciate the opportunity.
Excellent points that both you and Mr. Kildee made, and Mr. Boyle and Mr. Gutierrez. Thank you very much. Now we are joined by our colleague, one of the senior members of the Congress, one of the leaders on certainly immigration reform, but on so many other issues, a member of the Judiciary Committee, my colleague from California, Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren. And we'll have other panelists joining her. Yeah. That's all right. You could sit at Sarbanes' seat. We'll just switch the signs. And when none of us are confused, you are Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren. Thank you very much for being with us.
Hey, it's my pleasure to join you in this hearing on Make It in America and how we can make our country even better. And I think part of making
Zoe, if I can, the title of this panel is Making Government Work Better. Now, one may think, well, this is about making it in America, but people make it better in America, businesses make it better in America when government is working better. That's the point of this panel. Zoe,
well,
Congressman Lofgren.
Thank you for the clarification on the title, because I was about to say we're not going to make it in America unless government is accountable. And part of that accountability is having a government with integrity. We all know that faith in our government is not at a high, and I think there are a number of reasons for that. But I think one of the reasons is a sense that the system is rigged. And in fact, if you take a look at redistricting, there's some truth to that. It is rigged. Partisan legislatures draw seats to try and advantage their own members, and we've got a situation where the voters don't choose their elected officials, the elected officials choose their voters. And as a matter of fact, I mean, this is not a partisan issue, but Democrats got more votes for the House of Representatives in the last election than Republicans did, and yet that's not reflected in the membership of this House. Now, some of that is organic in terms of people living in cities as opposed to rural areas and the like, but a lot of it is rigged elections. And so I thought it would be helpful to bring the experience of California to bear at a nationwide level. What California voters did several years ago was to take redistricting out of the hands of the legislature and put it in the hands of citizens who were nonpartisan. They were selected in a process that could not allow them to be partisan. They were diverse. They reflected the whole state in terms of their experience, their ethnicity, their gender, their geography, their employment, and they had a very transparent process to draw the lines. And the result in California were more competitive seats, but I think also a greater sense that the system was not rigged and it was more up to voters than up to elected officials who would get elected. The bill that I have introduced really relates to Article 1, Section 4 of the Constitution that says that we can establish the means for elections for the House of Representatives, and it creates a commission for every state, or rather requires a nonpartisan redistricting commission for every state in the Union. I highly recommend it. Right now we have a few co-sponsors, regrettably no Republicans as of yet, but I'll just make this admission. When the ballot initiative was on the ballot in California, I didn't support it. I thought, well, why should California disarm? We have, a Democratic governor and legislature, and why should we do this ahead of everyone else? And you know what? I was wrong, and the voters were right. The commission has been a breath of fresh air in the state of California. It has resulted in districts that were compact, that made sense, and that were fair. And I'm glad that our voters were smart enough to choose that, and I hope that we can bring that across the country, have better districts, and restore faith in the integrity of this process. And I thank you, Mr. Hoyer, for letting me speak on this bill at this time.
Well, I appreciate very much your comment. And again, this is an issue that one might not say is involved with expanding manufacturing, but is clearly very involved in making good policy. I share the gentlelady's view that we ought to do this. We ought to have a national requirement that this be done so that the Congress was more representative of its people. Frankly, we see partisanship and deep divides within us when the American people aren't that deeply divided, but our districting has exacerbated the divisions that do exist and rendered us in some cases unable to make rational decisions. So I very much appreciate your testimony. I know your time is short and you had to do something else. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very, very much.
Mr. Kilmer, I'm going to go to you next because you were here. Derek Kilmer from the state of Washington served with great distinction in the state legislature and has succeeded one of my closest friends in the Congress, Norm Dix. Congressman Kilmer, we're glad to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Whip, and thanks for the focus on making it in America. You know, when I'm home, I spend a lot of time going out and listening to the folks I represent, and everywhere I go, whether it's a small business on the Olympic Peninsula or a VFW in Bremerton or at a block party in Tacoma, I hear a common refrain from the folks I represent. They want the economy on track, and they want to see our government get on track too. And as Democrats, our focus is on making sure that the middle class succeeds, and we want to make sure that everyone can join the middle class. And we see the power of government in assisting in building that shared prosperity. But we know that that power can only be harnessed when our government's working effectively. So at the beginning of this year, the new Democratic Coalition released the American Prosperity Agenda, which is a blueprint that lays out how our party can support a vibrant economy in which every American can have the opportunity to succeed, but also to make sure that our government works and that it's efficient and effective. And there are a lot of components of it. I'm going to talk about three. One is looking at how our government buys things and trying to make it a smarter purchaser. We've been part of a big push to reform the Pentagon's acquisition process. You know, business as usual has cost U.S. taxpayers too much. It's continued programs that stop at dead ends and has overburdened workers within the federal bureaucracy while also befuddling entrepreneurs and vendors. And there's opportunities here. So for example, to help businesses be more strategic about making investments and hiring decisions, we've asked the DoD to give vendors a better sense not only of what they need now, but what the future pipeline looks like. Innovative companies want to do business with a customer that treats them with respect, not just a customer that has deep pockets. And as such, avoiding unreasonable data calls and having an acquisition workforce that actually understands a business's business model and finding win-wins is a key. So we're working to make a system that's more effective and responsible and worthy of the men and women who serve this country. I've always believed that government works best when folks are transparent and accountable to the people they represent. And government agencies should take the same approach. So another idea within our agenda is a call on the General Services Administration to work with Yelp to create unique Yelp pages for each agency or department within our federal government. And now the GSA and Yelp have actually agreed to join forces so that people can use the services and share their feedback on their experience, in essence deputizing the American citizen to give them a voice regarding how to improve the services that they receive. And that's one piece, I think, in restoring public trust. Finally, we need to bring our government out of the 20th and into the 21st century. It's time to use new technologies like data analytics to root out waste and fraud and abuse and deliver better services to our constituents. It's something I'll be pushing for in the coming months. We'll be introducing a bill focused on improving the quality of government data, transparency of that data, and driving the better use of data. If I have a few more seconds, I'll mention one other thing as introduction to Congressman Sarbanes, who I know has been a real champion on campaign finance issues. One of the things we've been looking at is also trying to improve the Federal Elections Commission and put the teeth back into the watchdog that was intended to ensure that we weed out campaign finance abuses. The New York Times Magazine did an amazing article that details how the commission that was really meant to be the watchdog has gone off the rails with consistent 3-3 stalemates. There's 3 Democrats and 3 Republicans, and they've stalemated on truly everything, including on their 40th anniversary breakfast, whether to serve bagels or donuts. That's not a joke, and everyone knows the right answer is donuts. So we've got a bill that's focused on trying to make that commission functional once again and make sure we're revitalizing our democracy and give citizens a say rather than special interests. And with that, thank you again for letting me be a part of this effort. It's really important.
Well, thank you very much. And now I'm pleased to recognize my colleague from Maryland, whose father, of course, was one of the most distinguished United States senators in our history, and someone who has worked very, very hard on making sure that our government is responsive not to simply very big money, but to the American citizens and give them a way in which to participate in a reasonable and effective way. And before I do that, I want to tell Congressman Kilmer, I really appreciate, I know everybody appreciates, the role that the New Democrats play in focusing on how we make it in America, how we expand businesses. Congressman Sarbanes.
Thank you, Whip Hoyer, and I want to congratulate you on this initiative, the Make It in America initiative that you've been working on for a number of years. Continues to get real traction across the country as people understand the dual meaning behind that. And I appreciate your willingness to add to the conversation what it means to make it in America in terms of participating in your democracy, because I think a lot of people, in fact most Americans these days, feel that their voices just are not being heard in Washington, in Congress. They feel that the democracy is sort of broken down. And one of the big reasons for this, it's not the exclusive reason, but I think one of the big reasons is their perception of what in fact I think is arguably a reality, and that is the influence of sort of big moneyed special interests in Washington and in Congress. And people feel that the presence of those special interests are kind of pushing the average person to the sidelines of their own democracy, and that money is kind of gumming up the system. So the question becomes, what can we do to restore our democracy, to make people feel that their voices are being heard? I want to point to a quote from Senator Bob Dole. This is from 1982. It was just before he became the Republican Senate minority leader at that time. And he said, more than 30 years ago, when these political action committees give money, they expect something in return other than good government. It is making it much more difficult to legislate. We may reach a point where if everybody is buying something with PAC money, we can't get anything done. So here we are 30 years later. That prophecy has been largely fulfilled. I think many people would say if you lift up the hood on American democracy and look underneath it, the machinery has been gummed up by the amount of money that pours in here. So if we're going to begin to address the gridlock, the dysfunction, I think money has to be part of the agenda. How do we give the average person a voice out there? The second effect that money is having is, when you come into a conversation in regular order, if you're debating a bill, you're looking at legislation and you sit across the table from one another, it's appropriate to bring a lens of what your constituents think is important. It's certainly appropriate to bring the lens of what is in the national interest in terms of public policy. Too often, and this is not a conscious thing necessarily, I think another lens is added, and that is sort of what would the campaign patrons think, the people that support me financially, what would they think about this provision or that provision? And it kind of enters into the calculation, at least subconsciously, I think, of many members, and that distorts the way we approach the process of conducting public policy. So that's another reason to look at ways to kind of push back against this influence of money. And the last effect I think it has, and this really goes again to what I hear from my constituents, I think a lot of solid, decent, pragmatic Americans out there have begun to flee the political town square because they don't think their voice counts for anything. If they believe the system is rigged, if they have a perception that the system is rigged, that it's an insider game, the rational person makes the judgment, I'll just stay away from the team elements will rush in. And they begin to sort of dominate the discourse, and that creates more alienation. We need to get those Americans, maybe not the activists, let's say, but the people who want to be active and engaged as citizens, we need them to come back into the political town square. They're the ballast inside the ship of state that stops it from sort of tipping over. But they're not going to come back if they don't feel like their voice matters. So we've proposed legislation, the Government by the People Act. It's one of many efforts that would give small donors out there, everyday citizens, some real power again in their democracy. Matching funds would come in behind small donations and allow candidates to run a viable competitive campaign by turning in the direction of everyday citizens instead of feeling that they have to go to the sort of deep-pocketed sources of funding. If we do that, I think we'll bring back those Americans who've lost hope in their democracy, and with their voices in the political town square, we'll get back to good, sound public policy. So I hope that you'll consider that, and I appreciate the opportunity to participate in the discussion.
Well, thank you very much, Congressman. Few people have worked harder on an issue, I think, than Congressman Sarbanes worked on this issue, not only here in Washington and in the Congress, but all over this country, and obviously a lot of interest in his proposal. Let me yield to Congressman Custer, who has a question for Congressman Sarbanes.
Congressman Sarbanes, thank you so much for raising the issue of campaign finance reform, and I love your description of bringing people back in. My district is home to the infamous town meeting style government, and we are now hosting the first in the nation presidential primary. And I feel very, very strongly, particularly as a frontline vulnerable candidate, that the opportunity to use technology to bring small donors and small level supporters to participate in our offices we get 1,800 emails a week on issues. We have a very, very high level of engagement. And I'd love to bring that with you around the country. Could you comment on the mechanism and just how we can reach out to engage these donors that, $5, $3, $7. I had a fellow that used to work in my campaign. He would come in and bring me change, $12.50 every 2 weeks. And I never understood the amount until I found out that that's the sum total of the money left over from his disability check that he had to spend. And he was committed to changing the way our government works. And so I'd love to hear from you.
Sure.
Just the mechanics of that and how we can encourage low-dollar donors and supporters to get engaged.
Well, there's a lot of tools, obviously, that exist these days to reach out to everyday citizens, to reach out and encourage small donor participation. You're seeing campaigns across the country take more and more advantage of that. So I don't think there's a shortage of the tools and the technology to reach people. What we need now is to convince them that if they step in and they participate, that that's actually consequential, that it will translate into real attention to their needs and their priorities. And what's wonderful about a kind of small donor matching system of public financing is it makes that $25 or $50 or $100 donor a power player inside their democracy. There's two ways of reforming kind of money in politics. One is through rules, and that's important, disclosure, transparency, etc. But the other is through empowerment, where, in a sense, the everyday person who's sitting up in the bleachers of their democracy watching it play out on the field, in addition to blowing a whistle as a referee when one of the big money players gets out of hand, they feel like they can come down onto the field of their own democracy because their $50 donation is enough to get the attention of the candidate. So it's a combination of the tools, but also a narrative that says your voice really does matter, that I think will bring more and more people into this space and frankly, allow candidates to run a viable campaign by turning in their direction and not always having to chase the sort of traditional donor class.
Thank you very much. We got two more questions that have to be quick and answers quick, but I do want to recognize a former colleague of ours, one of the best members I think that I've served with, and we appreciate his being here, Congressman Alan Boyd. Alan, thank you for joining us. We appreciate that. Peter Welch.
Mr. Kilmer, you're working on contracting reform. We need that. We need technology reform. There's got to be user-friendly government and efficient government. I'm wondering if you just elaborate on some of the specific recommendations you have about how to improve contracting reform.
Yeah, there's a lot of components to it. Unfortunately, right now, we have a system that I don't actually think works for the department. I don't think it works for the taxpayer, and it doesn't work for the vendor either. And so I think there's a lot of levers to pull. Some of it is working with the contracting workforce so that they actually understand the business models of the companies with whom they're dealing, trying to make it so that, particularly in the commercial item space right now, you're seeing a lot of calls for sort of product-specific information that make it onerous enough that at some point some of the businesses simply say, I'm not going to do business with this customer. And as a consequence of that, when you have fewer vendors in the space, prices go up. And so that's not a winner for taxpayers either. So that's one of the areas that we've really been focusing some attention is how do you actually make sure that what the department is asking for is reasonable. The second piece of it is actually trying to provide some sense of certainty to the vendor so they know not only in a given contract what the department is asking for, but what the pipeline looks like so that they can make rational decisions around workforce and equipment investment, and providing some sense of stability for those vendors. Again, keep more vendors in the space and hopefully have more competition that benefits the department's ability to acquire things efficiently, promoting competition and driving down prices. Yep.
I'm next, so I'm cutting in my own time, but this is, I think, too important of an issue. And so, Congressman Kilmer, you're a part of Future Forum, Congressman Castro and Congresswoman Meng also. We've gone across the country, and, Congressman Sarbanes, one issue I've heard talking to millennials is they think the game's rigged. They don't really see why they should participate because of the influence of money and politics. And I'm just wondering if you've heard that, and if you see these reforms as a way to engage the largest, most diverse generation America's ever known.
I think there's no question that many, many Americans, including young Americans, think that the game is rigged right now. If you look at the turnout in the last national election, it was the lowest voter turnout we've had since 1942, before the march from Selma to Montgomery. I see Congressman Lewis here. And that's a travesty. But I think it's because, again, a lot of rational Americans look and they say, well, if what I'm being asked to do by going to the polls is make a choice between two candidates, one of which is going to go to Washington and represent somebody else, then why bother? Why not maintain a little bit of dignity and stay home and not pretend that my voice matters? Make that journey to the ballot box in the first place. So voter empowerment and small donor empowerment really kind of go together. I think if we create a new paradigm that makes that everyday citizen feel that their voice really matters in the current system, they'll close with one other observation that I think is really important, Mr. Chairman, and that is when you have small donor systems like this in place, public financing across the country, what are you finding? You're finding that the composition of the candidate pool is diversifying. People who before could never afford to run, they couldn't get through the money primary or the so-called green primary because they didn't know a lot of people with a lot of money. They're stepping up and they're running. In Maine, plumbers, electricians, grocery store clerks are running, competing, and winning and serving in the Maine legislature because public financing allows them to get in and be competitive. That's the promise of bringing that sort of reform to Washington as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think Mr. Smallman makes a good point, and Congressman Sarbanes, obviously, Congressman Kilmer, thank you very much for your testimony. It's amazing. We're keeping pretty much on schedule. So that's great. We're going to go to the next panel now. pleased to welcome this third panel, which focuses on American innovation. We're joined by Representatives Eddie Bernice Johnson. I don't see Eddie Bernice here yet, but I'm sure she'll be here. Oh, here's Eddie Bernice Johnson here. Scott Peters from California, Eric Swalwell, who just talked about the millennials and their engagement in our public square, also from California, and Seth Moulton from Massachusetts. This is Eddie Bernice, you're in the young panel. You young people are testifying here today, so we're very appreciative of that. And Scott is here. So I'm going to start with Congresswoman Johnson. All of them have been working hard to promote innovation, the sharing economy, small business exports, and access to capital for startups, all of which we hear a lot about. I'm pleased to turn the floor over to them. So I'll first recognize Eddie Bernice Johnson, the ranking member of the Science and Technology Committee.
Thank you very
Congresswoman
much.
Johnson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hoyer, and excuse me, and thanks to all of the people present. I'm trying to get my breath.
What is that squeaking? Does anybody hear that squeaking? Is that the door squeaking? Okay. Yeah.
I appreciate your leadership and efforts to revitalize American.
The squeaking door ought to get the grease. Make that suggestion.
Okay. Manufacturing. You know, I strongly believe that if the United States is to remain competitive over the long term, we need to ensure that American companies maintain the capacity to manufacture new and innovative products here at home. The key to maintaining this capacity is through strategic investments in advanced manufacturing, research, development, and education. I am proud that several programs have been enacted that contribute to the goals of Make It in America. These include the National Network of Manufacturing Innovation, which improves the competitiveness of U.S. manufacturing and increases domestic production, stimulates U.S. leadership in advanced manufacturing research, innovation, and technology, and accelerates the development of an advanced manufacturing workforce. Another example, the Regional Innovation Program provides support to innovative initiatives that accelerate technology, commercialization, job creation, and economic growth in America. Regional innovation efforts connect economic development and stakeholders across a region. Limited investments of public funds are leveraged to raise often significant additional funding from the private sector to strengthen the regional economy. Finally, there is the Manufacturing Extension Partnership Program, a national network of 400 centers and field offices that advise small and medium-sized U.S. manufacturing firms on ways to enhance productivity, technological performance, and strengthen their global competitiveness. I recently hosted a business roundtable with small business owners in my district. I actually do this on a monthly basis, but this particular one, the U.S. Department of Commerce's Assistant Secretary for Global Markets, Arun Kumar, was present. My goal in organizing the roundtable was to offer the entrepreneurs, investors, and small business owners in my district who are creating jobs and accelerating the economy the opportunity to speak directly to senior administration officials. Texas really is the nation's largest goods exporter, and small businesses make up more than 90% of the companies that exported from Texas in 2013. More than $27 billion of goods were exported from the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Washington needs to do a better job listening to the issues that are important to small businesses, and we need to better prepare our nation's small businesses for joining this global economy. I don't know how much time I had, if I can cut it off any time.
Go ahead.
Okay. In 2007, Congress passed bipartisan landmark legislation that originated in the House Committee on Science, Space, and Technology based on recommendations from the 2005 National Academy's path-breaking report, Rising Above the Gathering Storm. The report found that the scientific and technological critical to our economy leadership was eroding at a time when many other nations were gaining strength in these areas. The America Competes Reauthorization Act of 2010 continued the committee's and the Congress's commitment to strengthen American competitiveness through sustained investments in science, innovation, and technology. America Competes Act of 2015 that I introduced along with every Democratic member of the committee would renew our commitment to maintaining our scientific and technological leadership now and long into the future by supporting research, fostering innovation, supporting manufacturers and industry, and ensuring we have a prepared workforce. The bill also strengthens regional energy and energy frontier research centers, energy innovation hubs to help to advance the U.S.'s transition to a clean energy economy and to support the growth of new sectors of the economy and the jobs that come with them.
Congresswoman, we're going to include the balance of your statement in the record.
Yes. Thank you
I know you
very
have a
much,
couple
and I
more
appreciate
paragraphs here, but I want to make sure that we get to our other panelists.
Sure.
And keep on time, so our fourth panelist, before we have votes, will be able to testify. But
Thank
thank
you
you
very
very much, and thank you very much for your leadership. Critically important, you talked about the America Competes Act, which came out of your committee when Bart Gordon was the chairman. You were a member, now the ranking member and leader. Thank you very much for your leadership. Next, Scott Peters from San Diego, California. Very successful businessman in his own right, his wife very successful, and very focused on the Make It in America agenda. Congressman Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Hoyer, for convening this hearing and for providing all this with the opportunity to discuss manufacturing and making things in America, and for keeping this issue alive, really, in Congress. I represent San Diego. I'd like to talk a little bit about the economy there, just in terms of innovation, just to give you a perspective of where I'm coming from, and then maybe offer a few suggestions on what we might do in Congress to help things out. San Diego is home to a pretty unique cluster and collection of university research centers, military technology and cybersecurity development, medical device manufacturers, and hundreds of other biotechnology, pharmaceutical, and life science labs and companies. According to our Regional Economic Development Corporation, our region's innovation ecosystem employs 138,000 San Diegans. The research institutions alone, some of them Salk, Scripps, have a $4.6 billion economic impact as part of the $14.4 billion scientific cluster, and our life sciences cluster is usually listed as the second or third largest behind Boston and with the Bay Area. The University of California at San Diego receives more than $1 billion in research funding annually for groundbreaking scientific research for efforts including HIV and AIDS prevention and treatment, cures for cancers and degenerative diseases, and more. And we're home to 3 of the top 10 research institutions in terms of funding from NIH, have 3 more in the top 50. We're at the cutting edge of innovative cures. A San Diego company developed some of the first and most effective drugs to combat Ebola, and much of these research studies continue to be funded by DARPA. And we know that life science workers have high-quality jobs with average wages over $100,000, allowing them to recruit a highly educated workforce to our communities. I'm going to cut some of this out, but I did want to mention one scientist, Craig Venter, who founded the Venter Institute, started at the NIH, was the first to sequence the human genome, and continues to use federal funding for his research. His new institute employs 400 people, including several Nobel laureates who are continuing the expanding work in genomics and have delved into synthetic biology and clean energy research. I also am the co-chair of the Congressional Algae Caucus. Yes, the Congressional Algae Caucus. Some say, my wife says that makes me a pond scum politician. If you don't like my algae jokes, they grow on you. All right, that's it for now. My time is limited here.
That's good.
Thank you very much for your testimony.
I did want to mention the renewable energy work being done in advanced biofuels in San Diego, along with both public and private research on energy efficiency, smart grids, and solid waste methane capture. So we've long been known as a communications and technology hub. In fact, I guess finally the largest private employer is Qualcomm. Several large companies have been pivotal in the development of our growth of our commercial and defense satellite industries, the support of a range of services from Wi-Fi in the airplane to a global communications network for our military, a steady stream of information in the event of a natural disaster or a terrorist attack on traditional communications. So what can Congress do to support these things? Let me offer 5 thoughts quickly. First, we have to support basic research grants, specifically at NIH. Even with the 21st Century Cures Act earlier this year, we're not keeping pace with inflation, and our competitors in China and Europe are investing more heavily than we are. And today's scientists have the opportunity not just to do their work here, but can go all over the world. So we've got to keep up with our competitors. Second, we have to find a bipartisan way to expedite the FDA approval process, particularly in medical devices here. That's going to encourage offshoring. Third, we need to ensure that there's an incentive for private investment in ideas by allowing inventors to protect their intellectual property. That happens through a strong patent system that rewards inventors and those who invest in their ideas. Fourth, I continue to advocate for the repeal of the medical device tax. Small medical device companies in my district continue to tell me how this tax on profits is harming their ability to grow and making manufacturing products outside the U.S. more attractive. In fact, just this morning, one device maker in my district explained how the 2.3% excise tax actually increases his U.S. tax burden by 30%. And when you combine that with the slow approval process, it's really, it's an incentive to move to Europe that we need to avoid. And finally, we need to pass bipartisan immigration reform that will update our ability to keep United States the base of talent. We are educating some of the smartest people in the world at some of the best universities in the world, and then we tell them after they graduate that they don't have a permission slip to stay, so now they're curing their diseases and starting their companies in other places. We would not have wanted Google to be started in Russia, and I think that's pretty evident. So finally, Washington, D.C. is not the type of environment that generally generates tomorrow's solutions or spurs innovation, so we really need to listen to these folks who are telling us what to do. Our entrepreneurs, our manufacturers, and community leaders who are asking for our help, and I want to join with Whip Hoyer and the rest of your team to make sure that we provide that to them. Thank you.
Congressman, thank you very much for your testimony and the 5 suggestions that you made. I look forward to working with you on the medical device approval at FDA because I think the gentleman's absolutely right. We are encouraging people to go overseas, not because Europe doesn't have safe use of devices, but they have a much more accelerated process, and it makes a difference in whether they decide to make it in America or make it in Europe or someplace else. So thank you very much for your leadership. Next, Eric Swalwell, you've already heard from him in a question, but the speaker, the leader, has asked him to head up our effort to reach out to the younger generation, the millennials in our country, to make sure that they feel asked for advice and counsel and included. Thank you very much for your leadership. Congressman Swalwell.
Thank you, Whip Hoyer. Speaking of leadership, thank you for convening this forum for us to talk about how we can make it in America. And future forum members are present. We have Seth Moulton, who has participated in the future forum, and also Scott Peters is going to host us on November 10th down in his district.
Don't qualify for admission, but that's okay.
It's a mindset, not an age. Whip Hoyer, in 2007, 2 gentlemen in San Francisco, much like people across many of America's expensive cities, Brian and Joe, tried to make their way in an expensive city and found that, like many, they couldn't afford rent. And so they took some air mattresses, 3 of them, and rented them out. And they figured this was a way to help pay for their own rent. Then they realized they were onto something and launched what is today known as Airbnb. They went across our country trying to convince venture capitalists and investors to believe in them and to invest in them. And almost everyone turned them down. Every knock they made, every pitch they delivered was rejected and turned down. Today, the company is valued at $13 billion, almost half of that of Hilton. Tonight, 1 million people will sleep underneath an Airbnb. And I am here to urge Congress and this Make It in America initiative to not turn down what is known as the sharing economy in America. I believe we have an opportunity as a caucus to understand and learn why this economy is enabling millions of people to be participants and to contribute and supplement their income, and also a convenience for millions of people to stay in more affordable places, to have their kids driven around in more affordable ways, and just to make life easier in a way that is growing the economy. Many of you have likely joined the approximately 80 million Americans who have engaged in the sharing economy last year. It's made most famous by companies like Lyft and Uber. It allows people to rent or borrow goods directly from another individual to help expand access to products or services. I chair the Bipartisan Sharing Economy Caucus, and I hope to bring attention to the Congress changes brought by this sector and discuss ways that we can impact it as lawmakers and enable it while still protecting the consumers and the workers who participate in it. Global revenue from 5 key sharing economy sectors is at $15 billion today and has the potential to be around $325 billion in 2025. While sharing itself is not a new concept, we learned it in kindergarten, new technology has vastly expanded its reach, making our lives more efficient and increasing transparency. So whether you need a ride, a place to stay, someone to come and fix your stove, the sharing economy companies have created technology platforms to help us share and connect in new ways we never imagined. These technological innovations have helped us better use resources that will reduce our environmental footprint, provide goods and services to people that may not otherwise be able to afford to do so. One thing I'll add, Mr. Whip, is that a number of these leaders, these CEOs in the sharing economy, and the participants, the workers, across America, as the Future Forum has talked to these young leaders, they've told us that the Affordable Care Act has almost single-handedly enabled this new economy because it's allowed them to make sure that their employees have access to affordable health care. So I look forward to working with the Make It in America initiative to make sure that our caucus is leading the way, understanding this economy, and standing up for the workers and consumers who are using it every day.
Thank you very much. A very interesting testimony, very growing concept, and that's what this is. These series of hearings about Make It in America. What's next? Because repeatedly we see our economy exploded by things that we did not conceive of in our generation, whatever generation that was. And of course, the IT revolution is symptomatic of that. But Uber, Jen referenced, and other enterprises, which we may not have conceived of, but which we want to create an environment in which those ideas can be developed and realized and grow our economy. Next, so thank you very much, Congressman Smallwell. Congressman Moulton from Massachusetts, look forward to your testimony.
Thank you, Whip Hoyer, for hosting today's Make It in America panel. Economic development is the top priority for my district, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. America's economy depends on innovation. Congress must take action system that prepares our children for the jobs of the future. First, Congress ought to encourage innovation at every turn. In the past, if you wanted to succeed in the light bulb industry, then you had to have a company that made a light bulb a little bit more efficiently, a little bit cheaper than your next competitor. Today, if you want to succeed in that industry, you have to have a company that figures out how to build the next light bulb, to get rid of arcane technologies like the compact fluorescent. That's where we need our entrepreneurs, scientists, and technologists today. In Massachusetts, our economy is built on innovation. Just last week, I visited a biopharmaceutical startup called Acrivis Technology in Salem. They're creating life-saving innovations in the fight against cancer and have won 2 NIH Small Business Innovation Research contracts. Congress can help the next company like that get off the ground by dramatically expanding funding for the NIH, strengthening the SBIR program, and investing in the basic scientific research that will unlock the next new innovation. Second, Congress needs to promote entrepreneurship, especially among young people. The stark reality is that entrepreneurship in the U.S. fell 30% during the recession and hasn't recovered. In particular, young people aren't starting new businesses in part because they can't assume the risk inherent in starting a new venture. Many recent graduates are saddled with so much student loan debt that they simply can't afford to live in our nation's fastest growing cities, let alone quit their comfortable job to pursue a big idea. Congress needs to act to make college affordable so that young people can get busy creating the next big thing. We often say that small businesses are the engine of our economy, but that's not entirely true. While small businesses are critically important, new businesses account for nearly all net new job creation in this country. Agencies like the Small Business Administration ought to focus like a laser on helping these young businesses get off the ground. That's why I introduced legislation to modernize the SBA's microloan program. This bill passed the House earlier this year, and we need to get it across the finish line in the Senate so that businesses like Prism Products and Lynn can access the capital needed to create jobs. Lastly, Congress needs to help build a 21st century education system that prepares our students for the jobs of the future. We all know that a good education pays lifelong dividends by providing the skills necessary to earn a living wage and lead successful professional careers. However, we also know that the soaring cost of education is preventing too many Americans from pursuing an advanced degree or new job training. Innovation will drive our future economic growth if Congress makes the right investments to support our new businesses, our young entrepreneurs, and our students. We can do it. We can make it in America again. Thank you, Congressman Hoyer, for hosting today's event.
Well, thank you very much. Does anybody have a question of any of the witnesses? Mr. Lewis.
Thank you very much, Mr. Horton, Mr. Hoyer, Mr. Moulton, and to the rest of the panel, thank you for being here. Thank you for your testimony. Mr. Moulton, I want to know, and I want you to describe more to each one of us, to members of the panel, the debt that our young people are facing when they leave college. How does this interfere and keep people from making it in America?
Thank you, Congressman. It's a great question, and it is a pervasive problem for our generation. It's something that when Congressman Swalwell and I go on the trail and talk with future forum participants, we hear time and again. It's the #1 issue on young people's minds. If you have to pay so much every month in student loan debt just to stay above ground, they stay above water, then you're not going to be able to invest in your future. You're not going to be able to take a risk to start a new company. You're not even going to be able to invest in the local small businesses that drive our economy at home. So it really is a problem for innovation if you have huge student loan debt. And the amount of student loan debt in America today is in the trillions of dollars. I'm a member of Congress, and I have student loan debt. I'm paying off my college loans and my grad school loans, even though I had the help of the GI Bill to go to grad school. It wasn't enough. So I'm still paying student loan debt every single month as a member of Congress.
Thank you for the question, Congressman. And I also, as a member of Congress, I have over $100,000 in student loan debt today. And I see, talking to young people, that this student loan debt, it's like a scarlet number that is hung around their necks. And it prevents their ability to buy a house. We're the least home-owning generation America's ever known. Our ability to start a family, we are delaying as millennials starting a family later than any other generation ever in America. And it's delaying our ability to start a business. We are the least likely generation to start a business in America. And that's because simply at the end of the month, fewer people have enough money to start businesses, buy homes, and start families because it's going to the student loan debt. $1.3 trillion spread across 40 million people. And we have an opportunity, I believe, as a caucus to do something about it because our friends across the aisle have done absolutely nothing. And by reducing the amount of money that students have to pay at the end of the month, by letting them refinance their student loans, is one solution that our caucus has offered.
Mr. Welch?
Mr. Peters, I was interested in your comments in referring to places like maker spaces and fab labs, and something that can democratize innovation and motivate entrepreneurs. Can you talk about California's use of these types of spaces and how they help in growing entrepreneurship?
Well, I'm from the East. I'm from Michigan and New Jersey, and never wanted to live in California. I would say that my wife dragged me there kicking and screaming. She got a job, and so now I'm stuck in San Diego, which isn't all bad. But one of the things that people ask me quite often.
As a matter of fact, it's wonderful,
right.
Isn't it, Mr. Peters?
People ask me what was the biggest
We
surprise.
may want that off the record.
People ask me what was the biggest surprise about going to Washington D.C., and I tell them, it wasn't the weather or the plane rides. It was it's the culture. There's a real culture of creativity and innovation, and the components of that are that we'll be willing to sit around the table and talk about solving tomorrow's problems without regard to kind of where you went to school or how long you've been here, what your rank is. And frankly, I think it's a little bit of a challenge for Washington, which is very rank ordered um, and sort of worried about the past, to think about how to change, to deal with the dynamism in the economy and change that's inevitable. So the Fab Lab, for instance, is a good kind of creative community space where people can come try out innovations. We did sort of a Fab Lab at the La Jolla Library. We set up the first public biotechnology lab for people to come in and use with all the equipment that you might get at a major company. Those are the kinds of things that we're very comfortable trying out in California. I think that's not the only place. There's other places like that too, but those kinds of things come very naturally for us, and I think the reason why I think you see a lot of creativity out of my home district and areas like it.
Mr. Cicilline.
Thank you to the panel.
Wait a second. Congressman Johnson, did you want to comment on that?
Yes.
Okay, Congressman Johnson.
Mine will also address Mr. Lewis's question. In my district, back when I was at state level, I created an incubator at a community college, which still goes, and we have two others in the area, and we just got a patent office because we're producing a lot of young minds with talent and creativity. But the student loans do get in the way. When they have a new patent, it's very difficult for them to get it financed without practically selling it to someone else because they can't go to the bank and add more debt to what they have. And many of our graduate students that have all these capabilities, and some are not graduate students, but they have the biggest debts. And so that's a hindrance, and I just wanted to make that clear.
Mr. Cicilline, thank you very much, Congressman.
I just want to first thank the panel and particularly thank Congresswoman Johnson, who's been involved in this issue for a very long time, and for your great leadership on manufacturing in particular. And my question really is, I know that one of the great challenges that many young entrepreneurs face in Rhode Island, and we have many wonderful entrepreneurs, is access to capital and kind of their early funding. And I'm wondering whether, Congressman Moulton, your legislation intends to address that, whether crowdfunding has been useful, but kind of the traditional places, and Congressman Peters, perhaps you have some thoughts on this as well, having young people who come up with great ideas for a new product or a new company, but then often face, tremendous challenges in that early capital, particularly because of the kind of debt they're living with as a result of leaving school or being in schools, like the Airbnb folks who are actually in school when they're developing these things. But what's that early funding like for young people, and what can Congress be doing to help really nurture that?
No, that's a great question, and my bill was a bipartisan piece of legislation that passed the House to reform and modernize the micro-lending program, which provides loans generally in the $10,000 to $50,000 range for small and growing businesses. And this is a critical funding stream. It helps businesses not only get off the ground, but sort of get over the initial hump and get to positive revenue. And it's been incredibly successful. The statistics about how great the program has been in the past are encouraging, but it was discouraging how limited the funding was, and so we've been able to open it up. I also signed on to a letter with Representative Swalwell to push the SEC to release the rules for crowdfunding, because Britain is way ahead of us here. The UK already has rules. We should not be following behind them. We should be in the lead. And so a lot of businesses are sitting on the sideline knowing that this funding could be available for them, just waiting on the rule makers here in Washington.
And I thank you for your question. I would just say that the private sector has a really good, efficient way of allocating capital to risk. And I appreciate the story that Mr. Swalwell told about the Airbnb guys. There's a lot of those folks that are running up against that and probably not being successful, but that's okay by me. I think that that's something that the private sector does fairly well, and it sorts things out. From our perspective, I just offer the thought that public investment in basic science, public investment in some basic defense strategies has borne out, created a lot of opportunities for people in the private sector. So if you look at NIH and what's come out of that in terms of ideas for curing diseases, but if you look at DARPA and the defense investments in basic scientific research, I think that holds a real key for capital, for capital availability from us. And if you think about acquisition reform, which is a big topic in defense right now, one of the things we can do is provide relatively small grants to people to try new things. And I think you'll see more of that as a trend in defense acquisition as well, taking advantage of the efficient allocation that happens in the private sector with seeding from the public sector.
For your testimony. And as I say, we look forward to working with all of you in terms of incorporating your ideas in the Make It in America objective and agenda. The fourth panel and final panel today is on the future of American manufacturing and skills training. Manufacturing, of course, has always been at the center of the Make It in America plan, and it will continue to be a major focus. Because we have 6 members on this panel to speak about what America's manufacturing sector needs to continue making gains, competing around the world and creating good jobs here at home, we're going to break it into 2 rounds. And we'll try to do it relatively quickly. For the first round, we're joined by Rick Larson of Washington State, David Cicilline from Rhode Island, and Brenda Lawrence, who I know is here. She's now walking forward from the state of Michigan. Mr. Larson, we'll start with you. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Whip, and thanks to the panel for putting the whole day together and for focusing on manufacturing. I want to take a few minutes to talk about a particular aspect of manufacturing that's pretty near and dear to Washington State, and that's the aviation sector. Throughout the country, and especially in the state of Washington, aviation means jobs. To give you an idea of this, there are 1,350 separate companies in our state that are involved in the big business of Boeing, but also companies that employ 2 or 3 or 4 people. Many of these jobs are safety. So by making these changes at FAA and reauthorizing XM, we can ensure that the next generation of aviation manufacturing jobs stays here in the U.S. And I hope I can count on all of you here to help make sure that happens. Thank you.
I'm sure you can, and thank you very much for that testimony. Next, David Cicilline. He did not mention when he posed his question that Rhode Island is the...
Oh, it's coming. It's coming, Mr.
Where manufacturing started in America. And I knew it was coming. I just thought I'd anticipate that.
You can't steal my lines, Mr. Webb.
No, I know. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Whip Hoyer, for your incredible leadership on this Make It in America effort and for convening this hearing to discuss the future of the Make It in America plan and particularly workforce development. Over the years, our manufacturing industry has pushed this nation forward, defining much of our economic history, and today, manufacturing presents new opportunities as a robust 21st century enterprise. As you well know, Mr. Whip, because you visited us in Rhode Island is the birthplace of the American Industrial Revolution. Rhode Islanders are proud of our history of innovation and investment in the manufacturing sector, which has maintained a strong presence as a permanent part of our state's economic landscape. Manufacturers employed over 41,000 workers in Rhode Island in 2014 and exported $1.68 billion in manufactured goods. But we can do much more in Congress to ensure that our manufacturing sector continues to grow and thrive in today's economy. And I believe maintaining and strengthening firm Buy America requirements will help keep traditional manufacturing in America. And I'm proud to have introduced the 21st Century Buy American Act, which closes loopholes that allow federal agencies to waive Buy American requirements, increases the domestic content percentage requirement, and provides resources to U.S. manufacturers for items in short supply to help them compete against foreign manufacturers for U.S. government contracts. This bill will help rebuild our manufacturing industry and create new jobs by providing an increased demand for American-made products by the federal government. I think it's also critical that American manufacturers be notified when there are opportunities for procurement contracts with foreign military entities. This issue was brought to my attention by a constituent who learned about uniforms for the Afghan National Police, and he is a textile manufacturer and wondered why couldn't he participate. It led to the successful enactment of an amendment that I offered that we named after him, the Brickell Amendment, that requires domestic manufacturers to be notified of those opportunities. Several months after attention was brought to this issue, Mr. Brickell secured a $27 million contract to manufacture berets as part of the uniform and doubled his beret division workforce in Rhode Island. So it was a direct result of really understanding that we need to be sure that American manufacturers have those opportunities. We also need to codify the Investing in Manufacturing Communities Partnership Program at the Economic Development Administration, and I'm working with Senator Gillibrand on legislation to do just that so we can ensure that this program, which supports regional projects that focus on manufacturing, can continue to work in our country all across America. Attracting individual investments one at a time, but transforming themselves into globally competitive manufacturing hubs. And finally, I want to just mention that the White House in August of this year designated Rhode Island to be part of the President's Tech Hire Initiative, which is a multi-sector effort to empower Americans with the skills they need to succeed in today's economy. Tech Hire cities and states work with employer partners on new ways to recruit and place applicants based on their skills to create more accelerated tech training opportunities that invest in innovative placement programs to connect trained workers with entrepreneurial opportunities and well-paying jobs, and to do so quickly. And it's a very dynamic, wonderful public-private partnership that can ensure that our workforce remains competitive in the 21st century. I thank you for allowing me to be part of this panel and look forward to working with you and all of my colleagues as we promote this Make It in America agenda.
I want to thank Mr. Cicilline for his leadership as well as Rick Larson's. And now I'm pleased to recognize a former mayor and now new member of Congress, but not new to public service or to job creation, Brenda Lawrence from the state of Michigan. Now, I might say we've been told, are the votes going to be at 2:55 or are they going to call votes at 2:55? So we're going to be fine. Okay. Congresswoman Lawrence.
Congressman Hoyer and my colleagues, thank you for inviting me to testify about the importance of investing in America's skilled workforce and the role of skilled workforce plays in strengthening America's manufacturing industry and economy. A strong manufacturing sector is essential to our nation's economic success. According to the data from the Bureau of Economic Analysis, manufacturers contributed $2 trillion to the U.S. economy in 2014. The manufacturing industry also supports an estimated 17.6 million jobs in U.S., on par with about 1 in 6 private sector jobs. In Michigan alone, more than 600,000 Americans are employed through the manufacturing industry. Just last month, Michigan ranked second among all states for adding 2,600 new manufacturing jobs. So, Mr. Hoyer, the answer to make it in America, what's next? It is the skilled workforce. Manufacturing is making a strong comeback and is poised to have even bigger gains in the years to come. We cannot afford to miss this opportunity to provide jobs and to build our economy. According to the Manufacturing Institute, more than 80% of U.S. executives believe the widening skills gap in our workforce will negatively impact our ability to meet customer demand. As some of you know, I am the co-chair of the bipartisan Congressional Investment in America's Skilled Workforce Caucus. I, along with my co-chair Yvette Clark and Congressman French Hill, we started this caucus to highlight the growing concerns and challenges voiced by industry, labor, and academic experts regarding the difficulty in finding skilled workers to fill a future increase in manufacturing jobs, as well as the skill gap currently prevalent in our workforce. I'm proud to say that the caucus has 31 members of Congress, including 9 Republicans, who are committed to working together to examine this challenge and to find answers. Last month, I was fortunate to accompany President Obama on Air Force One to a city in Michigan, where he announced $175 million in American apprenticeship grants. Michigan is one of the 14 states to expand apprenticeship programs by more than 20%. However, much more needs to be done. The U.S. ranks 28th out of 29 developed countries, spending only 0.1% of our GDP in federal expenditures on workforce training programs. We need to overcome the negative perceptions of vocational training programs and apprenticeship programs. There was a time in America that we took pride in an honest day work at a skilled trade. We need to return that sense of pride to what remains an honorable profession, one that is in high demand right now. We must recognize that a 4-year college program is becoming a financial challenge for most middle-class American families. According to a report by Georgetown University, there will be 55 million job openings through 2020, and more than 60% of those jobs will require some form of post-secondary education and skilled trades. Unfortunately, the United States is expected to fall short by 5 million workers at the current production rate. The bottom line is the U.S. can and must close the skills gap to remain competitive and to rebuild the most productive workforce in the world, the American middle class. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Congresswoman, and obviously I think you reflect a theme that has been consistent over these last 3 hearings I'm not sure we've had 40 or 50 witnesses, members, and that theme has been a recurring theme. Obviously, we need to pay attention to it. Sheila Jackson Lee had a question. Oh, excuse me, Barbara Lee had a question. Lee, I got Lee. A quick question, yeah, and then I want to go to the next panel.
thank all of you for your testimony and just say to our whip, thank you for staying very focused and consistent on Make It in America, because many of us, and we hear your testimony about the importance of manufacturing in our country and what has happened as a result of the fact that many of our jobs have gone offshore. But Mr. Hoyer visited my district and saw a whole new world of manufacturing as it relates to artists and to the tech industry and the type of creative manufacturing now that's taking place in the East Bay. Also, just as an example of another manufacturing company in my district, chocolate, Ghirardelli chocolates are made. A large manufacturing plant in my district provided for years good paying jobs with benefits, and many people don't know, but that's where they are made. And the chocolate is made, and so
there's a member of Congress who would have you think it's made in another district.
Well, San Francisco and Oakland love, and San Leandro, we all love Ghirardelli.
All right, I got you.
It's actually manufactured in my district. And so there are many manufacturing operations that provide good paying jobs that we really don't know about. And I think what you're doing is helping us, first of all, uncover and identify those that are still with us and what it takes to create these new types of manufacturing opportunities. I wanted to ask Congresswoman Lawrence, and I came in during your testimony, and thank you very much, because your leadership in terms of workforce development and skills training is surely needed here. A portion of your district, I know you see many of the unique challenges in terms of growing the skills in terms of manufacturing field for your constituents, but can you talk a little bit about, and I apologize if you did earlier, in terms of communities of color in this economic recovery that's produced more than now 12 million private sector jobs? How in Detroit are communities of color faring in the manufacturing industry as you retool your economy in Michigan?
Thank you for that question. One of the things that has created the passion that I have, Michigan or Detroit, we are the face of manufacturing, and it was, as you know, as we started in our manufacturing sector in our economy, it was labor driven. And the middle class, and especially for African Americans, was created by being able to go into a factory or manufacturing area and be able to become middle class. You could buy a car, send your kid to college, buy a house, and you had benefits and a retirement. Well, the reality now, those labor jobs are replaced with technology. They are replaced by robots, by computer programming. And so the jobs, as we are revamping and really the manufacturing industry is coming back, a large number of those labor workers were laid off. Laid off not because they weren't good workers, but as the industry became more sophisticated, as some will say, or used more technology, they lacked those skills. So instead of standing there putting a screw into a car door, a robot does that now. And now we need someone to program and repair the robot, electronic technician, computer programmers. So when we are in an industry that is very we're trained, we know how to manufacture, we must now reinvest in those workers, and the large number of them are African Americans with those skilled trades. And so we're trying to reintroduce skilled trades in K through 12 to understand that skilled trades is now what your father used to walk out of high school and go into a manufacturing job. But now you can go into manufacturing, but you must have those skills. And so that is the challenge that we have, not only in Detroit or in places of color, is to let the communities know and be very firm in introducing these opportunities in K through 12 because they're not exposed to the skilled trades.
Vote called, so we're going to go to the next panel right away. I know there were some other questions that wanted to be asked, but we're going to go. They've been here waiting. Sheila Jackson-Lee, Jim Langevin, and Mark Pocan are from Wisconsin are here. I thank them very much, and we'll be. They'll take their 3 minutes apiece, and then we'll have to go vote right away. But thank you, and I want to thank those who came to listen to our colleagues testify, and to demonstrate how important the Make It in America agenda is. Thank you very much. All right. Okay. And if we can keep it to 3 minutes so we can all make the vote, that will be important. Sheila Jackson Lee. Ms. Lee, thank you very much.
Mr. Whip, thank you so very much. Thank the members very much for their attentiveness and the importance of this particular session on Make It in America. And Mr. Whip, 2010, I think, was the founding year. Let me congratulate you because you have been persistent, and we have joined you in that persistence, and I'm delighted to be here. Let me quickly, as I thank you, express my appreciation for the economic priorities and challenges that we have the opportunity to share in the Make It in America plan. As we continue the critical work of identifying and advancing effective policy change for our communities and collectively throughout the nation, it is important that we acknowledge the great progress we have made. Our president has signed into law 16 Make It in America initiative, all of which we have supported together, and I have supported, some of which I've been a co-sponsor. As we look to the pillars and priorities of Make It in America, it is important to keep sight of the nearly 100 additional bills my colleagues and I have introduced, calling for strategic action and fair enhancement of our economy as we continue to experience this growth. The Make It in America plan aims to ensure that these jobs are permanent and sustainable. The plan sets out we must adopt and pursue a well-developed national manufacturing strategy that begins right here in America. We must promote the export of our manufacturing goods so that businesses can compete overseas. We have made that great step as we move forward in the Export-Import Bank, working with small businesses. We must also encourage businesses abroad to bring jobs and innovation back to the United States. And lastly, we must, and most importantly, train and educate a workforce that will secure the sustainability. I want to just offer into the record an article that said it's 2015, the year every U.S. city will add jobs, and it says for the first time the recession ended, payrolls are expected to grow in all America's cities. Another article that suggests that jobs are moving to many different states, and just want to read one quote. Many Texas cities have experienced a downturn, but what is remarkable about top-performing cities is the diversity of their economies. Most have tech clusters, but several, such as Houston, Nashville, Tennessee, Dallas, and Charlotte, have growing manufacturing, trade, transportation, and business service sectors. That is the key. My bill, the American Rising Act of 2015, which stands for Realizing Informational Skills, is a bill that presents that opportunity. This is a bill that, due to the Bureau of Labor Statistics in 2012, national employment rate for persons with bachelor's degrees was lower than others. This is a bill that provides for support for recent college graduates who need experience that can be obtained only in the workplace to refine their skills and lay the groundwork for productive careers. And small and disadvantaged businesses need the technologically based problem-solving skills possessed by recent college graduates, particularly those with training in the areas of science, technology, engineering, and math. Enabling recent graduates to obtain employment with small businesses and companies operating in an economically distressed area benefits the national economy by granting graduates deferred payments on their student loans with frozen interest rates while they gain essential business management experience and they can put into practice throughout their careers, all the while providing that human capital. The benefit of the participants in under this legislation, the federal government would provide relief from the piling interest rates of graduate student loans by implementing a freeze on their payments from 2 years, while graduates who have not obtained a STEM degree are able to pursue a second training course or certification program in STEM fields with eligibility for federal financial assistance. These graduates would also have completed a degree in the STEM fields within the past 24 months, will be eligible to receive a deferment of the cost of the previous school balances by obtaining 2 years of additional education. The program participants will gain valuable experience applying the knowledge learned in college. They will understand technology and be able to work. The final key elements of the program would be that the federal government would provide relief to a core of recent college graduates in order for them to be deployed to assist struggling small and minority businesses that would make a difference. Finally,
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to hold
move
up
on.
the HCC.
They'll be included in the record.
I want to put it in the record, which is a college that is dealing with high tech in Houston, Texas, the Houston Community College, Northeast, welding, automotive technology. They want to get jobs. I yield back.
You're right. Thank you very much. And thank you for your leadership on these issues. You've been terrific. Jim Langevin from Rhode Island.
Thank you.
Rhode Island has 100% participation in this hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Hoyer. I appreciate you convening today's hearing and for your steadfast dedication to rebuilding our nation's manufacturing sector. So thank you for that. Today, I'd like to touch on a topic that not only affects my home state of Rhode Island, but is also has broader economic implications for the nation, and that's our skills gap. The President has spoken about this several times in his State of the Union messages. I know that Congressman Lawrence just spoke about it in the previous panel, and it's something that I have cared passionately about and spoken out many times myself. I hear a constant refrain from employers in my district and other places that despite their numerous job openings, they are unable to find employees with the necessary skills to fill them. This gap is a persistent drag on our economy, but it is one that we have the tools to fix. Vitally important at a time now where we see jobs coming back from overseas, and they're coming back to America, but with their more advanced manufacturing, they require high-tech skills, use of robotics and computer programming and such. As co-chair of the Bipartisan Career and Technical Education Caucus, alongside Mr. Thompson of Pennsylvania, I've made the reauthorization of the Kildee Perkins Career and Technical Education Act one of my top priorities. The Perkins Act is a major federal funding source for career and technical education in high schools, career and tech centers, and community and technical colleges that support skills training. And it's my hope that we can work in a bipartisan manner to pass a strong reauthorization of the Perkins before the end of this Congress. Ultimately, the success of any skills training program lies in the employer-educator partnership. Students need to be aware of the skills necessary to succeed in their chosen field, and they need to visualize the potential opportunities available to them. The emphasis on in-demand skills cannot be overstated, and the easiest way to ensure that training matches workplace needs is to make sure that employers and school systems are working hand in hand to train the future workforce. Now, one of the most effective means to expand coordination between employers and educators is through the use of apprenticeships. While these programs are not as common in the United States, they have enjoyed long time and widespread acceptance in Europe, particularly in Switzerland and Germany. In fact, 2/3 of Swiss students and 60% of Germans are finding their careers through an apprenticeship. Earlier this month, I hosted a CTE caucus field hearing in Rhode Island. Businesses and educational leaders were briefed by experts from German and Swiss industry as to how their apprenticeship models work and how they're most effectively adapted to the United States. The success of these programs lies in strong buy-in from local businesses. We need to make sure that Perkins provides support to companies so that offering apprenticeships becomes a viable business strategy. Community colleges, likewise, need the flexibility to accommodate these apprentices and offer classes that fit into the schedule of a full-time employee. With a proper level of engagement and the right set of policies in place, these partnerships can be a true catalyst for workforce development. In closing, let me just say again to Mr. Hoyer, thank you again for convening today's hearing. The skills gap is a large problem, but it is certainly one that we can solve. I look forward to working with everyone in this room and beyond to ensure that all Americans have the training to be college and career ready. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think you're absolutely right. We've got to broaden very substantially apprenticeship programs in the United States. There's so many opportunities, short of a 4-year college degree, in which in Germany, as you cited, has shown that to be the case. Mr. Mark Pocan from Wisconsin, we thank you for being here. You're last, but you're not least at all. So we look forward to your testimony.
Well, thank you very, very much, Mr. Whip, for inviting me and for your efforts with Making It America. I grew up in Kenosha, Wisconsin, a working-class town with a very large auto manufacturing presence at one point. We were home to American Motors, and later Chrysler. We made Gremlins, we made Pacers, and we made cars that people actually bought. And almost everyone had a family member or a neighbor that worked in the industry and were paid a good family-supporting wage. Today, I'd like to touch on 2 items I consider to be very important moving forward as we craft an agenda for Make It in America. The first is the role labor unions play in ensuring we have a robust middle-class market for American goods and services, and the second is our need for our workforce to have cutting-edge skills training to ensure we have the most competitive workforce and up to any challenge. There are many reasons for growing inequality in our economy, but perhaps the most significant reason for the disappearing middle class is that the rights of workers to join together and bargain for better wages, benefits, and working conditions has been severely undermined. In the 1950s, more than a third of all private sector workers belonged to a union. Today, though, fewer than 7% of private sector workers are unionized. And despite rising productivity, wages for the typical American worker have barely grown since the 1970s. The reason for this decline has been the persistent attacks on organized labor. Long delays and procedural hurdles give big employers plenty of time to whip up campaigns against unions, even threatening they'll close down and move elsewhere if a union is voted on. One of the clear steps we can take to expand the middle class is to restore workers' rights to bargain for better wages, benefits, and working conditions. We need to make it easier for workers to have a voice in the workplace, providing a bigger paycheck to middle-class families. With all this means is that unions are a critical ingredient in an economy with a robust middle class that provides ample opportunity for social mobility. When workers' voices are heard, their wages rise, leading to more purchasing power and a stronger, healthier, American-made economy. Which brings me to the importance of having cutting-edge skills training for workers. We have to make sure that our workers receive training to fill cutting-edge manufacturing jobs through traditional and non-traditional sources, including apprenticeship. Today in America, fewer than 5% of young people train as apprentices, the overwhelming majority in the construction trades. In Germany, as mentioned, the number is closer to 60% in fields as diverse as advanced manufacturing, IT, banking, hospitality, and healthcare. In 2002, evaluation of registered apprenticeship programs by Mathematica Policy Research found that the tax return of every U.S. government dollar invested in registered apprenticeship programs was a $27 return. So why is the U.S. lukewarm to apprenticeships? A lack of education and awareness of existing programs, incentives for businesses to participate, and the cost of these programs all work against the adoption of apprenticeships in the U.S. Another major obstacle to implementing an apprenticeship system similar to Germany's is the established framework for the German apprenticeship system. The PACE Act, which I introduced last Congress with Senator Patty Murray and Congressman George Miller, would address these problems through the use of registered apprenticeship programs and the integration of apprenticeships using post-secondary education. Unions are central to creating a robust middle class, and apprenticeships are vital to creating a skilled 21st century workforce. As we continue to discuss an agenda to make it in America, it's important to keep that in mind as two key issues to improve our economy. And again, thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Well, thank you very much. One of the things I think all of us heard was the consistency of agenda items that were necessary if we were going to expand manufacturing, train people to participate in advanced manufacturing, and to expand our economy and create jobs. Brendan Boyle, I don't think you were here for his testimony. His testimony mirrored your testimony in terms of the importance of workers being organized to participate in the increased profits and productivity which is available, but they're not getting. And we know that the middle class is sort of stuck, and manufacturing in the past has made a difference on that and can continue to do so. I thank the panelists. I thank those excuse me, who participated in these hearings, and we're going to have a subsequent hearing in which we'll have stakeholders, largely manufacturers and others, who are going to come in and give their perspective on what we can do as policymakers to expand and encourage more manufacturing, more creation of good jobs for people in America. Thank you very much. These hearings are adjourned. Yeah. You're right. By the way, let me say that they're going to keep the vote open till 3:25. So we've got some time, 3:25. The votes will be open until 3:25, the first vote.